Fade in. Cut to.
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
Day.
Night.
Action. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Restaurant Fiction, the podcast where we review fictional restaurants, bars, and clubs in TV and film. I'm your host, Monis Rose, and today we are going to review The Forge. The Forge is prominently featured in the Cinemax show Banshee. For those of you who are foreign to Banshee, first of all, shame on you, but it's never too late to join the party. I learn that every single day of my life. Banshee is like every single amazing, awesome, bitchin' 80s action movie rolled up into one, but the TV show version. Now, of all people who know The Forge, we got Jonathan Tropper. He is one of the co-creators and showrunner of Banshee. Probably even knows it a thing or two better than even we do. So we had him on. We picked The Forge because of all shows out there, Banshee rests on the shoulders of this bar that pretty much the entire story of the main character would have never existed if he never even went to this bar in the first place, which is featured in the pilot episode. Before we begin our interview with Jonathan, where he provides some insight into the show, the creation of it, and also some advice to novice and veteran writers, a couple of caveats. First of all, Jonathan mentioned some of the show's characters. Those will be Lucas Hood, Job, Sugar Bates, Proctor. Yes, all characters of the show Banshee. So that's what he's talking about there. Now, here's the review of The Forge and interview with Jonathan Tropper. We at Restaurant Fiction, we went to this place called The Forge, and The Forge is a general store, or it's like a general store, and it's off the beaten train tracks. It's actually on the wrong side of the train tracks. It's near Highway 39 in Pennsylvania, next to, for those who are not familiar with Pennsylvania, it's next to Amish country. So why and how did we, Restaurant Fiction, pick The Forge? So we like bars that are not really hidden, and they're not really hidden gems. It's just no one goes to them. No locals go to them, and no regulars go to them. Who really visits places like The Forge are drifters. They're like vagabonds. These are the men and women who come and go, and really they don't really want people to know about them. They just want a good, stiff drink. That being said, we liked The Forge because when you go inside, it's dark, it's stank, it's dreary. You get the impression that people have either died in this place, in The Forge, or they have actually sought redemption. And that's actually a good thing. So, in terms of the actual liquor itself, it's pretty much top shelf hard liquor. They have a really stiff, Balvenie double wood. Of course, being in Pennsylvania, there is Yuengling on tap. You got to have the Yuengling, of course. Underneath the bar, if the bartender does like you, he does have a unmarked bottle, which we have deemed Grandpappy sauce, and it tastes, it's pretty much a place for fights. I don't mean to, or us at Restaurant Fiction, we don't condone fighting, we don't condemn fighting, but there are many bars in the world, in the U.S., that are meant for fights. We particularly like a bar called the Double Deuce. And this one in particular, there is always, for whatever reason, a fight that's going to happen. And that being said, and if you are at the forge during this particular time, everything is on the house. The food, the drink. I mean, it's really meant for you to keep quiet. It's also meant for you to hopefully come back again. And us at Restaurant Fiction, we always like free drinks and free food. All right, so Jonathan, how was that review? What was wrong? What was right? And what would you add or enhance about it?
I think that's pretty much on the nose. It's really a no-frills bar that was set up more as a place for the bartender Sugar Bates to just hide away in and while away his twilight years in, and he'll pour you whatever he's got to drink, and if you want to order food, no matter what you order, you're going to basically get steak and fries, unless it's the morning where you might be lucky enough to get some eggs. And I think the menu is probably pretty basic and limited no matter what. I think it'd be really hard to find a good salad in Banshee, but it's the kind of bar that the people who would want to go to a bar like that will find, and no one else will ever find, because it's really not on the beaten track, that's for sure. You certainly don't ask for a cocktail.
How much time goes into the development of the Forge?
With the show Banshee, we had a notion that everything about Banshee is that everything used to be something else. We have a gangster who used to be Amish. We have a cop who used to be a criminal. Our police station, working on those themes of identity. Our police station used to be a used car dealership. We really try to go at everything in Banshee having sort of a repurposed identity. So the Forge, the notion was that before it became a bar, it was an old blacksmith shop. And that's why it's called the Forge. And there are still tools of the trade left there. There's a huge smelting pot, and there's some of the gears and the tools that blacksmiths use, the hammer and whatever you call those big tongs they use to get things out of the fire, as well as the fire pit. All of that is still in the Forge and on the walls. It hasn't been removed because it probably would take too much effort and work to remove it and then repair the floor. So it just becomes part of the atmosphere. And the idea is that, this, like everything else in Banshee, used to be something else. That's also why the dimensions of the bar are kind of unusual. Like, you have the bar and you have these tables, but you also have sort of a high ceiling and a cavernous room because of what it used to be. And so that was the initial idea of it, and we wrote that into the script. And then, once we were getting made and we had production designers involved, they began imagining that as, what that really looks like and feels like, and we ended up with the Forge. Yeah.
How does the Forge enhance the characters, either Sugar or the sheriff or anybody else?
Well, I think it really just grounds them into the kind of characters they are. All the other characters you meet on the show live in, some of them live in luxury and some of them live, in more modest accommodations. But, Sugar and Lucas Hood Sugar lives behind the Forge, Lucas lives above the bar next to the Forge. And when you live in a place like that, you're basically admitting to yourself and putting out to anyone who watches that you're somebody who hasn't lived a conventional life, who doesn't have conventional attachments, and who basically has nothing in the world, can pick up and leave tomorrow without having much to leave behind. And so I think, when you see Lucas's accommodations, which are very much an extension of the Forge, and when you see, Sugar in the Forge, you just kind of realize that these are people who sort of have gone through life, had some highs and lows, and ended up in a place where they recognize each other as sort of, misfits and outcasts. To me, it was just a place where we could, foster that really kind of unstated tone of masculine friendship, which is something that I find isn't done a lot on television, but I just wanted there to be, in a sense, some kind of man cave where, these guys could return to lick their wounds and connect with each other. And so, probably my favorite scenes to write overall for years were just, the scenes where Lucas, Sugar and Job are in the Forge, because it was you could write with a certain tone, and you could really get into, the way men relate to each other, non-verbally as well as verbally, to sort of support each other. And that's what the Forge really became for me.
As a writer, does it allow you to have a breathing room?
Yeah, well, that's what it became. I mean, it started out as the birthplace of Lucas Hood, because in the first episode, that's where he witnessed the murder of the real Lucas Hood, killed the guys who did it, and ultimately, picked up the badge and became Lucas Hood. So, in that sense, the Forge was his origin story. It was his birthplace. But what it grew into was sort of the place where our lead character could return to over and over again, and just kind of, some shows have confessionals, some of the comedies have confessionals where, every 5 minutes or so one of the actors is talking to the camera about how he feels. And, we're a drama, and we certainly aren't touchy-feely like that, but it was a place where, Lucas could go lick his wounds, hear truth from Sugar, and kind of, it was a place of, sort of no bullshit male bonding and connection, and that's what it became.
For the series finale, you bookended pretty much the whole series with the last scene in the Forge. Why?
The sort of the psychic energy of Lucas Hood. It's the Forge. The Forge is where he started, and the Forge is where he kept returning to, and that was his base. And he was never comfortable wearing the police uniform. He was never comfortable lying about who he was, in Banshee, but when he came to the Forge, he got to be who he really was, with the only people who knew who he really was. And so, in fact, every time he walked through those doors, he was, in a sense, that was the only time that he was his genuine, true self. So that made perfect sense that that's the place where he would say goodbye as well.
Excellent. What's the craziest pitch that you've heard concerning a scene in the Forge?
Well, we did talk about Proctor burning it down.
Really?
Yeah, and then, we just couldn't bear to do it, but we did have a whole pitch when it becomes clear in season 3 that Sugar has sided with Lucas Hood over his old friend Proctor. We had this idea that Lucas would drive up to it one night and it would be, on fire. In the end, in season 4, we had Proctor burn down Lucas's cabin, but in season 3, we did talk about burning down the Forge at the end of the season. We also kind of knew that between season 3 and season 4, we were going to move from North Carolina to Pittsburgh, so it seemed like a good way to get rid of a really expensive set we would have to rebuild, but at the same time, we just couldn't bear to get rid of it because it had become really the emotional center of the show.
Where would you rather go? Would you rather go to the Forge or to the Savoy?
To me, it would always be the Forge. I like quiet, and I really don't like strip clubs. That set, the Savoy Strip Club that we built, is probably the biggest set we ever built, because it had a lot going on there. It had multiple levels, and it had offices in the back and changing rooms for the girls. It was, it was basically the size of a functional strip club. I don't think, I would doubt the drinks there were as good. At the same time, the days we shot in the Savoy, the crew always had a little more spring in their step, because we did bring in, 15 strippers every time we shot there, and, those guys spent a lot of their weekend dollars.
How much detail needs to be created and developed when creating, say, a world set in the Forge or a bar that you put into one of your shows?
It's tremendous. I mean, the work people do, the thing that production design and then set deck do, it's incredible. Like, every picture hanging on the wall behind Sugar, you would never even notice them, but like if there's a newspaper clipping about one of his prize fights from when he was a fighter back in the day, we wrote the article, and the article was put on aged newspaper print and put in there with the picture, and so if you were to walk through the bar, nothing would be fake, even the things the cameras can't pick up. All sorts of pictures and mementos, the creases in the seats, the stickiness of the tables from years of, beer slop, it's all in there. And, we would sometimes sit in there doing work while they were shooting on the next stage, and you just feel like you're in a real place for the most part. Except there's no air conditioning, but, of course, probably wouldn't have air conditioning anyway. But it's, the detail is incredible. Like, every little thing on the walls, every dent in them, every, every piece of damage and wear and tear is all actually crafted.
What advice do you have on writing a bar in a TV show?
You want to sort of think about, how is this bar made? What's the history of this place? Where did it come from? How did he come to own it? Who are the people who come here? And that's what sort of gives you the ability to sort of, build it and build it on the page in a way that, when the production designers get to it, you're going to end up with something unique, so that every time you shoot in that bar over the course of your series, the viewer will immediately, latch onto the mood because they're very familiar with the place as well.
Wow. And did that kind of involvement, that creation, did you put the same time into Warrior in terms of creating the bar?
Yeah, just a few weeks ago we were I have in Warrior, which takes place in the 1870s in San Francisco, we have a bar in Warrior, an Irish pub, and when the first drawings came through, it looked a little bit plain to me, and so I began talking to the production designer. I said, listen, this is a bar that an Irish immigrant put together over probably 15 or 20 years. First he bought one little shop, then the shop next to him went for sale, and he bought that, and then he had to wait to save the money to knock down the wall between them, and then he finally got the third shop. So this can't look like a clean, square bar. This has to look like a bar that was cobbled together over 20 years by an Irish immigrant, living the dream, and that greatly informed the way the production designer went back, to the drawing board and came up with something much more irregular, much more kind of makeshift, something that's just coming into its own now, and you can feel that when you look at the drawings. I can't say what it feels like to stand in it yet because they've only just started building it, but it's that's how you try to go about it, by giving the locations as much character development as the characters.
Well, and it'll also probably even enhance your actors that you cast when they walk into the set. It would even feel more real to them.
Right, and then at the same time you have the practical considerations, like we plan to have fights in this bar, so we need to make sure, there's room for that. We can't have all the tables fixed to the floors. We don't want booths because that won't give us enough room for fights. And, you have to also have, where are the cameras going to go? There has to be, logistical planning that comes in, but that always comes in after you first sort of arrive at what the character of the bar is.
What elements do you look for when staffing a writer's room?
I do a different kind of writer's room than a lot of shows, and I don't like a writer's room that goes on for months and months and months. I think that's a big waste of resources that comes out of your show's budget. So I generally only like to do a writer's room for 2 or 3 months, break out the episodes, 10 episodes. I'm doing premium cable. If I was doing network and I was doing 22 episodes, that would be different. But I like to, do a room for just a few months, break out 10 episodes in pretty good detail, and then send writers off to write. And then when their drafts come back in, either reconvene again for a month or else just give them notes and keep going. But I've never had a writer's room going while the show is being shot, which I think makes us rare. Usually the writer's room is still ongoing while the show starts to be shot. And I just always like showing up on location with all of my episodes written so that, you can develop a lot of efficiencies in terms of how you plan your shooting once you have all the episodes. So it's a very short, intense writer's room that goes for a few months, and then 2 or 3 of the writers in there stay on and become producing writers and write episodes with me, and are around to produce them, and then we go start the next season with another room.
How often do you take new writers versus well-established writers?
I used to only hire pretty established writers. My philosophy on that has changed over time. I now feel like a good writer who's still young but is a good writer can write every bit as good an episode as an established TV writer. To me, I just want them to have enough experience that I know, they've written, 60-page episodes before, that they understand how to work off an outline. But beyond that, I don't really, to me, it's not about how long they've been around. It's more just looking at some samples of their own original work and seeing if there's a strong voice there that I think would lend itself to my show.
How many rewrites do you do on a script?
It never stops, honestly. Like, I've probably done on the pilot for Warrior, probably up to my 6th or 7th draft now, and it'll keep going until after we shoot, because you're constantly making adjustments. Like, first, you're just getting notes from the other producers. You're getting notes from the network. Then, you start the physical production process, and you realize, we're not going to have the budget for that crazy helicopter shot, so I got to come up with something different for that. And, we're building these sets. We're not going to have that exterior, so I got to come up with something different for that. So, then you start rewriting to budget and to actual living sets. And then you're casting, and then depending on who you cast and what their strengths and weaknesses are, you may start rewriting to them a little bit, and then, the actors get involved and start troubleshooting the scenes, and, you start hearing them out loud and realizing, that's a little too talky. And, you're constantly fine-tuning it until you shoot it, and then, after you shoot it, you still sometimes end up fine-tuning it in post a little bit. So I couldn't really tell you how many, but it just never stopped.
Gotcha. And why put a bar or a restaurant in a TV show, in any TV show?
Nobody wants to watch characters just standing in a room talking or sitting in a living room talking. A bar and a restaurant gives you a place. First of all, you can fill it with extras. You can put them in the public. You can give them distractions. You can give them something to be doing. You can, you can include other characters. It's a plot engine as well as a good place to talk. So it's just, that's the reason they've been using it since time began. There's always been restaurants and bars and movies and TV.
We couldn't have said that better ourselves, because honestly, that's what Restaurant Fiction's about. Now, that was one hell of an interview. We learned a lot. My highlights were there was a functional strip club. That was pretty funny. Also, what was really insightful, that sort of writer's room that Jonathan creates, or that anti-writer's room. And it brings to the question, I guess, makes me think, and makes maybe writers out there think, is that going to be a trend? Will paid cable streaming networks and also broadcast diminish the generic, or what everyone thinks of is the writer's room, and just do it Jonathan Tropper's way? So that is also interesting. Oh, one last thing. We received word from Jonathan that he will be back, and he will be talking about the pub featured in Warrior once it's released. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to the Jonathan Tropper interview on Restaurant Fiction. If you want a lot of Jonathan Tropper besides watching his stuff on DVD, the Banshee episodes, of course, and also on Cinemax Go, you can read his novels. Unfortunately, do not expect the high-octane action from the TV shows translated into his books. His books are quite different. And for more reviews of Restaurant Fiction, please go to restaurantfiction.com. I'm Monis Rose, and keep it real, keep it fresh, and always keep it on the flip side. Cut to
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
Day.
Night.